Welcome to Video Conundrums, guys. Okay, so for Video Conundrums, each week we encourage you, the audience, to submit your questions to us. So if you do have any specific situations, difficulties with video that you would like answered, then send them to us and we'll try and answer them live on the show. Now, this week's Video Conundrum comes from Laura Donington, Marketing Communications Manager at Smart Energy Greater Lincolnshire. Laura, let's shoot over to you. Let's get your question.
Hi, I'm Laura and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager for Smart Energy Greater Lincolnshire. So I use an iPad to shoot the videos on, and I just wondered if you had any tips.
Thanks so much, Laura. So look, there are a few tips I do have with your iPad. Shooting on an iPad is very similar to shooting on a phone. So one of the first things I would suggest is on our webinars page, after the webinar, have a look at our webinar on shooting on mobile. It was prior to the Shootsta Show, so just a webinar, not a flashy show like this, but it was really hands-on, really in-depth with great tips for shooting. Now, I actually want to give you a couple of tips now live, obviously, because you don't want to have to go somewhere else to find those. So one of the first things I would suggest is trying to always shoot horizontally where you can. I'm getting a little bit of reflection from all the daylight falling onto that screen there, but try and shoot horizontally. Unless you have a very specific need to shoot vertically, horizontal is the standard for video. The next really cool tip I've got for the iPad is jump into the settings for your camera in the main settings for the iPad and turn on the grid for the rule of thirds. And that will just help you line things up really nicely. Now, if you're shooting people, you'll have a grid line across the top of the screen here, and that will give you a really good indication of where the eye line should be in any of your shots. There's a few more of those. I definitely recommend checking out how to shoot on mobile webinar. There's a lot of good tips in that. But from shooting, that's my biggest tip. Now, the other big thing using an iPad is it's very different to using a phone. Phones are normally small enough that we can hold them in our hand. I don't have a phone on me here, but with an iPad, it's much more cumbersome. And when you're holding it, after a little while, it becomes much more unsteady. So my advice is always with an iPad to try and grip it with two hands and not do what I was doing and hold the camera under your hand. So gripping it with two hands is going to get you a much steadier shot. And when we're teaching videography or photography, one of the things that we teach people is the videographer walk. So if you need to keep this steady, the other thing you can do is bend your knees just slightly. I'm just sinking, but bend your knees ever so slightly to just cushion you, and it will make you slightly more stable if you need to do any moving shots. Now, if you can, it's a great idea to look at any accessories to keep the iPad stable. Again, because your arms are going to get way tighter, way quicker holding an iPad like that than a phone. Although I do recommend having a tripod or a grip of some kind to hold the phone too. But having something you can actually mount your iPad on and point it at people or yourself or your products is incredibly key, because it will keep your shots nice and smooth, and you won't get any shake in them. Unless you're going for that Jason Bourne look, which in that case, go nuts and run around after people in the street like that. But for most people's corporate videos, they're not doing that, and they want things to look very slick, very smooth, and very stable. So look, same rules as an iPhone, shooting horizontal. And one of the other things to do is just make sure when you're holding it, and this is going to differ for every model of iPad. I'm stepping slightly closer, but there's a couple of different places there are microphones on your iPad. On the model I've got here, it's just up there in the middle of the antenna band. There are also, because an iPad is a large device, sometimes microphones in other places, and it varies model to model. So what I would say is make sure when you're recording, if you don't have an external microphone, which is always the best practice, just like Luke was talking about with voiceovers, try and plug a microphone into it or get a wireless mic like the one I'm wearing. But best practice, if you don't have that, is make sure your hands aren't over that microphone. So if you are gripping it like that, you may want to just make sure that your hand isn't covering the microphone, because if you're covering the little dots on the top of the iPad, I think you can just see them there they are, then you'll muffle your sound and you won't get great sound. So it's a really good idea to look for those microphones as well. Phones are a little easier because they have microphones in different places, which are designed, and they design them to be used as video devices. But tablets are still a little bit, they're not necessarily designed ergonomically. Last but not least, there's an accessory out there I love called the Beast Grip, which is completely gets your hands off the iPad. They're not cheap. It's professional video equipment made for an iPad at that stage. They're not cheap at all. They're probably about £100, maybe 120 euro, but they get your hands completely off the iPad and make things even more steady. But Laura, I hope that helps. That's just a few tips, but definitely check out our webinar on shooting on mobile, because that will cover all of the basics of framing, lighting, picking a really good location, and all that stuff is so important as well. So Laura, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to put my iPad down now. I'll see you all next week. Take care.